To welcome Tia Pappas, Operations and Experience Leader of Basketball Operations.
Okay, to start us off, if you would please turn to the person next to you, look them dead in the eye, and introduce yourself as a genius. Wow. There's a seat right here. Thank you for joining this session. My story starts in a very little tiny town called Wellington, Utah. Woo, do we know Wellington in this room? What? Are you a Wellingtonite? Wow. Okay, Wellington has a population of 1,600, like right now. And at 5 years old, I was an active member in the Junior Jazz League there. I was also the only girl in the league, and I was also the best player in the league. My very first coach was my dad. Anyone here ever coached or been coached by a family member? It can come with some baggage. And my earliest experiences with feedback happened not at practice or in a game, but they happened in my dad's truck on the drive home. Okay? The time between the final buzzer and my driveway, it was sacred. It was a time where my dad stopped being my dad and he just became my coach. And I stopped being his daughter, and I was just a little girl dreaming of playing in the NBA. It was a time and space where we could leave the baggage at the door, and he could give, and I could openly receive honest, direct, sometimes tough feedback, but feedback that was gonna make me better and help me reach my goals. And then I would get home, and no matter how I played, I could have laid an egg and made a point for the other basket. My mom would have given me a big hug and said, "You did amazing." And that did not help me become a better basketball player, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at the moment. My basketball career continued. I did not make it to the NBA, but I did play 4 years at Westminster University. We have some Griffins in the house? No one knows what a Griffin sound makes, but that is my interpretation of it. And the jump between high school to college was really, really big. You know, the girls were stronger and faster and smarter and better. And it makes a lot of sense because when you play at that level, the whole system is designed for high performance and constant improvement. Everything you do every single day is designed to help you get better as an individual, as a team, so that you can win more games and win championships. You have professional coaches for offense, defense, mindset, strength. You practice, train, watch film, huddle, debrief. You get feedback every single day, and you get better because of it. My sophomore year, I finally started to figure things out a little bit, and I was getting some playing time. I was a guard, and I had a fair outside shot, but my game was inside. I like to drive into the paint, that rectangle around the basket, if you don't know. And I like to shoot around the basket and kind of draw contact from the bigs. And when that is your style of play, you tend to get fouled a lot. And so you shoot a lot of foul shots. And I did. And that year I would walk up to the foul line, and there would be a collective sigh in the gym, because I was shooting 50% from the foul line. And if you don't know, that is very, very bad. And I was devastated over it, okay? And the other thing about when you're in a system of high performance, if you're not performing, you stand out. And I was such a head case. I felt I was letting down my team. I would stay after practice, I'd shoot hundreds of foul shots, and nothing I did made a difference. And finally, my coaching staff was like, this is a problem. They hired an external shooting coach who all she does all day is help people improve their shot. And I had one session that lasted 1 hour, and she changed one thing about my shot. And the very next game, I shot 100% from the line. And I never looked back. I ended my career at Westminster as just shy of 80% foul shooter, which is a respectable foul shot percentage. My first job out of college, I worked for a company called Habits at Work, and we, based in Chicago, we're a sales training company. The company still exists today, hired mostly by big tech to come in and roll out large skills programs. And the biggest, most complex and fun project I got to work on there, and I was with the company for 8 years, it was with a company that you all know very well. It rhymes with schmoogle. And they brought us in at a very unique time in their business. Historically, they had been kind of the only solution and best solution in the market, which meant that their sellers didn't really have to sell much. They were very product focused, and they kind of took orders, and that's a blanketed statement, but that was what they were dealing with. And things were changing. Competitors were starting to pop up, the market was changing, and competitors were taking market share. So they brought us in, and over a 3-year period, we rolled out a sales skills program with the goal of helping their 13,000 person sales organization develop consultative, customer-centric sales skills. Do you know the very first skill we rolled out? A framework for giving and receiving feedback. Because that was their access to developing all the other skills that they needed to be able to compete in the market. And that framework, that feedback framework, went on to be the foundation of their sales school, the schmoogle way of selling. From my childhood through college into my first job, my entire life was just steeped in feedback. I was part of systems and teams and cultures where constant effective feedback was just the norm, and I didn't have to work that hard to find it. I found myself in those systems. And then I stepped out into my own entrepreneurial journey, and I realized that I had been living in a feedback fantasy. And that in the real world, and in most businesses, highly effective, consistent feedback is not the norm. In fact, it's actually very, very hard to get. And that insight is what led me to what I do today, which is helping teams build the systems and infrastructure to be able to grow intentionally, be able to adapt to what's happening in the market, all while staying very, very aligned with their customers. And feedback is at the core of all of that. Whether you are building a company or leading a team or just trying to level up in your own role, feedback is not automatic. It is a system you have to build, a muscle you have to grow, and a habit that you have to practice. And that's what today's session is all about. It's about building the habit of asking for feedback and the system for doing it effectively and consistently. And very specifically, we have 3 goals for our time today. Number 1, you're going to leave knowing the difference between repetitive practice, where I was shooting hundreds of foul shots after practice and it was making no difference, and deliberate practice, the kind that leads to visible progress and long-term mastery. Number 2, you're going to leave knowing a very simple but effective framework for asking for feedback in a way that builds your confidence and your competence. And this framework can also be used to give feedback. And lastly, you will know how to and why asking your customers for feedback is your untapped superpower in accelerating growth and deepening your customer relationships. How does that sound to everyone? Good? Okay. At just age 7, Mozart was wowing audiences around Europe with his skills on the piano and the violin. But it was another one of his skills that's even more impressive. Mozart had perfect pitch. He could identify any note on any musical instrument. And being pitch perfect is very, very rare. About 1 in 10,000 people have this skill. That's 0.01%. And it is still just as rare today as it was during Mozart's time, but it is much better understood. Mostly thanks to a Japanese psychologist named Ayako Sakakibara. And about 15 years ago, she conducted a fascinating experiment. She brought together 24 children just age 4, just very little people. And over an 18-month period, these children practiced identifying individual notes on a piano for a couple of minutes, a couple of times a day. This was not very long, about as much as you would think that a 4-year-old could practice. And the results of this study were astonishing. At the end of those 18 months, every single one of those children had become pitch perfect. They had become masters. They had become the 0.01%. So, was Mozart born with an incredible gift? Absolutely. But what this study shows is that every single one of us is born with the exact same gift, which is a flexible and adaptable mind, able to become geniuses in whatever skill that we choose. Hence, a room full of geniuses. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, what did these kids do in those 5 to 10 minutes a day that allowed them to get so good so quickly? Well, we're in Salt Lake, so I know a lot of us drive. Who here is an experienced driver, like a car driver? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you? How good are you? An 8, okay? How good are you?
Maybe like 3.5.
3.5, okay. Not very good. Any 9s? Do we have any 9s? Yeah, we have a couple of 9s in the audience. Okay. When I learned to drive, I was terrible. I learned on an old farm truck, and it was a stick shift, and I was driving around alfalfa fields in Wellington, Utah. And I was terrible. And I'd drive a couple feet, and I'd kill the truck, and my dad was in the passenger seat, and he was giving me feedback, except with the baggage this time. And eventually I got better, and I passed a driver's test, and I was cruising down Old Wellington Road, and I said to myself, I've got this. And from that point forward, I stopped driving in order to get better, and I started driving in order to get from A to B, kind of on automatic. Have you ever driven to work or school, and you get there and you don't remember how you got there? It's very scary. That's driving on automatic. And what I now see when I look back at my driving career, all this experience, I'm not that much better today than I was at age 18 or 19. I've driven so much, but my skill has really just plateaued. And the same thing happens in business. Have you ever met someone with 20 or 30 or 40 years of experience and they're just not that good? It's more common, it's more common than we think, and it actually gets worse. I know we're in Salt Lake, so we don't have many cabs, but who here has been in a cab in New York or Chicago with a cabbie that drives 8 hours a day, has tons of driving experience? How is that experience for you? Okay, maybe not that great. Because when we do things on automatic, mindlessly, bad habits creep in and they actually make us worse over time. Now, when I asked you a few minutes ago to rate your driving ability, I didn't define the scale. So if 0 is not being able to drive at all, but 10 is the driving ability of a professional race car driver, Mario Andretti, Danica Patrick, would you still rate yourself an 8 or a 9? Probably not. See, when we look at their driving career, they too couldn't drive at all when they started. But at their peak of their career, they're 10 to 30 times the skill level we are. So what explains the gap? There are 3 things. Number 1, when we all said, I've got this, Danica said, I want to be great at this. And we started driving in order to get from A to B. She continued to drive with the intention of getting better. That type of practice is called deliberate practice. Okay, so that's number 1. She practices deliberately with the intention of getting better. Number 2, she has coaches. Coaches who know what excellence looks like in driving, who guide her deliberate practice. And number 3, they guide her practice by giving her the right kind of performance feedback. The same kind of feedback that was given to those children that allowed them to get so good so quickly. Now, my friends and colleagues at Habits at Work and the Kellogg Sales Institute recommend a very simple but effective framework for giving and receiving performance feedback. This is known as the 2x2 feedback formula. It's on the little card you receive. This can be a reminder for you at your desk of how to use this framework. It is designed to be conducted in about 2 minutes. Okay, this is a quick little feedback session, and this is how it goes. After a round of practice or performance, my coach will say to me, Tia, what's one thing you think you did well? And I'll think back on all the things that I think I did well. I'll choose the most powerful, and I'll share that. And then my coach, she'll think about all the things she thinks I could do better, that she thinks I did well. She'll choose her most powerful, and she'll share that. And then I will say, thank you, because feedback is a gift. By starting with what I did well, we achieve a few things. We focus on what had me stand out. Have you ever heard the saying, if you want to be good, work on your weaknesses, but if you want to be great, work on your strengths? Number 2, we build my confidence. And as a result, I'm primed and open to hear the more constructive feedback that comes next. And then my coach will say to me, Tia, what's one thing you think you could do differently next time? And I'll think back on all the things that I could do differently. I'll choose the most impactful, and I'll share that. And then my coach will share her most impactful do differently, and I will say thank you, because feedback is a gift. By ending with what I could do differently next time, we build my competence. Mastery, genius level skill in anything is the sum of our confidence and our competence. Now, I'm gonna ask for a volunteer today, okay? Because I would like to model what this framework looks like with someone. So I'm gonna ask for a volunteer, someone who will come up here and act as my coach, who will facilitate this framework with me, and give me some feedback on how the session is going so far, okay? So I need a brave volunteer, and don't worry, because my mom is here, and in about 20 minutes, she's gonna give me a big hug and say, you did amazing. So you can be really, really honest with me right now. Who here will volunteer to model this framework and give me some feedback? Woo! Okay, well, good thing I'm not doing this on your driving. And we'll share a mic. Okay, remind me your name. Rainey. Tia. Okay, Rainey. Okay, nice to meet you. Rainey, you're gonna be my coach, and I'm gonna help you facilitate this. So to start, you're gonna first ask me, what's one thing you did well?
Okay, what's one thing you think you did well?
I think one thing that I did well was standing out in front and seeing people's faces and trying to amp up the energy after lunch and trying really hard to connect with everyone that came in this room.
Okay, do I agree with that? Because I agree with that. That was great.
That's a great question, and we can kind of talk about the nuances during Q&A.
Okay, let's go back to that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So then you're going to share with me your one thing you think I've done well.
One thing you're doing great is interacting with the audience and asking for feedback, and then still staying on the path of your, what is this called? Yes, you're staying on the plan, the path.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, great. Okay, so now you're going to ask me, what's one thing that I would do differently?
Okay, what's one thing you do differently?
Okay, and this is funny because my do differently is actually kind of like your did well. And my do differently is that I would have built in a little bit more engagement earlier on in the session. And that's just my facilitator brain going off, is I would have, just engaged like one-on-one with a couple people a little bit more.
Okay.
And that's okay that we have the same answer for different questions.
Okay. Am I allowed to ask a question, or
Sure,
do you want
sure.
me? Okay. How would you have done it differently?
Oh, no, we're going to stick to
we're
the
gonna
framework.
Okay.
But I love that you asked that question. And again, we can talk about the nuances of this framework. Okay, so you're going to share your one do differently.
Do differently. I would say, when I said 3.5, maybe ask why would you say that, or I just made that up.
Yeah.
Because I think you're doing great.
Right?
But that was the part that I really think you should do better at responding.
Stay connected,
Right.
engage with you a little,
So,
why are you such a bad driver? What's happening? That made you so bad.
Maybe make you feel bad.
Yeah, no, I like that feedback. Yeah, just to connect a little more, I moved on. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That is not an easy thing to do, to look someone you've never met in the eye and give them feedback. Okay, before we go on, I want to make one thing really, really clear. Not all feedback is good feedback. In the last year, I have received more unsolicited feedback than I have in my entire life. Any guesses of why that is? I became a mother. To this adorable little baby, his name is Apollo, and tomorrow he turns 1. And our most common comment that we get is to put some socks on that baby. And then I respond, my baby runs hot. You don't know us. Right? And apparently, I didn't know this, but a lot of people are part of the NAPOAYB, which is the National Association of People with Opinions About Your Baby. This was something I just became aware of this last year. And I'm kidding. I know people mean well. I do. But it is a great example of feedback given without context and consent is at best a little annoying, and at worst, it can really make you doubt yourself. The best kind of feedback is the kind that we ask for from people we trust about things that really matter. Okay, so we've talked about the right kind of practice, and that is deliberate. We've talked about a framework, and now you've seen a great example of how to use a very simple framework for asking for feedback and giving it. Now, all we need is a coach, which actually can sometimes be the hardest part, depending on our role, or, maybe we're out there blazing our own path. It's hard to find a coach that we can trust. And I would like to encourage you to consider that all of you have an amazing potential coach right under your nose who has insights that you really want to hear. And that is your customer. Okay, and it could be, for those of you who are not in customer-facing roles, your customer might be your team. It might be an internal team that you serve, okay? So we're talking about just kind of broadly your customers. A couple of years ago, more than a couple now, I was on a pretty routine train ride from Chicago to Milwaukee to visit a client, and I started the meeting off, as I always do, by sharing an agenda. And the agenda probably looked something like this. We agreed on why we were there and what we were going to get out of it, and then we talked through every single agenda item, just to make sure we were aligned. And then I said, as I always did, and before we wrap up today, I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes asking you for some feedback and checking in. And she said, great. Yes, I'd be willing to do that. Amazing. So by putting feedback on the agenda and asking the client permission at the start of the meeting does a few things. Number one, I have asked customers for feedback in hundreds of meetings, and still to this day, I want to chicken out. By putting feedback on the agenda and getting their agreement up front, it significantly decreases the chances that I'm going to chicken out on asking for that feedback. Number two, it gives my client a heads up that I'm going to be asking them for feedback, because as we just saw, feedback is really hard to give. It's very easy to send a survey. It is not so easy to look someone in the eye and give them feedback. So I should take my own advice and should have given you all a heads up that I was going to be asking someone for some feedback. okay? Because not only does it make them feel more comfortable, but I've found that it also makes the feedback better because they have time to actually consider what they want to share with you. And then number 3, and this is where the real magic happens. Similarly to my dad getting in the truck and becoming my coach, in that moment when I ask their permission for the feedback, my customer becomes my coach and she roots for my success the rest of the meeting. She figuratively stands up from across the table and she sits right next to me, and we're on the same team because when I win, she wins. The better I do, the better I serve her. And that relationship really carries throughout the rest of the meeting. It is a transformative moment. So we go through the meeting, and with the last couple of minutes, I said, okay, it's time for feedback. Client, what's one thing that's going well? What are we doing well to serve you? Or what did I do well in this meeting for you? And you can kind of broaden or narrow the question as much as you'd like. And she said, I love that you always show up with an agenda and you stick to it. These are my most productive meetings. And I said, perfect. Count on me to keep on doing it. And then I said, and what's one thing that I could do differently to serve you better? And she went totally quiet. And this is a really normal reaction from people, right? This is a hard thing to do, especially if it's a new relationship or you're just starting to kind of put this system in your workflow. So expect this. But it was not normal for this client because we've been working together for years at this point, and she was like an old pro at giving me feedback. And I started to worry. I was like, oh my God, like this is bad. She's really, I could tell she was really, really nervous. And in that moment, I urge you to just sink into the discomfort and resist the urge to step over the silence or to bail them out with a suggestion of what they might say. Okay, like power in the pause for those of you who are in that session, just sink into the discomfort. And that's what I did. And for 10 seconds, we just stared at each other. And it felt like 10 minutes. But I knew that if I just waited on the other side of that horribly awkward silence, there would be gold. And she didn't disappoint. She kind of sat up, and I could tell she was mustering up her courage. And she said, there is one thing. My boss, the CEO, she keeps track of the newsletter. And she noticed a couple weeks ago that you unsubscribed. And I had. A couple of weeks before, I signed up for Unroll Me. Do you know what this is? The service that allows you to mass unsubscribe from newsletters to clear out your inbox. I did that. Very unknowingly and unintentionally unsubscribed from this client's newsletter, and it was very clearly a problem. And I'm panicking. And then I'm thinking about all the other clients who I may have unsubscribed from, who may have noticed, and this is a problem. And in that moment, I did the only thing that I know to do, which was to say thank you. Because that feedback was such a gift. I was able to mend a relationship that I didn't even know was broken. I apologized, I explained, I had resubscribed before I even left the building, and then spent the whole train ride resubscribing to all the other clients that I had unsubscribed from. And I will never make that mistake again, and I'm sure no one in this room will make that mistake. Feedback, asking our customers for feedback is hard. And sometimes what they have to say is really, really not fun to hear. But when you do it consistently and you build that muscle with them, and they come to know that you're going to ask for, listen to, and then act on that feedback, it stops being risky and it starts being a gold mine. And that's when feedback really becomes fuel for growth. Feedback is the bridge between who we are and who we are becoming, who our business is, and what it becomes in the future. And the more intentional we are about closing that gap, the faster we close it. The gap between good and genius, the gap between satisfied customers and loyal evangelists, and the gap between today's potential and tomorrow's future. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. of feedback. Thank you. I know that you have a little card, and this is meant to just be something that you put